It is so good to see you, Nick. I got a question for you, though. What you think you were going to do? You were going to put on a mask and make believe you were normal? Or I'm going to catch up to you? We were a family. And you tried to kill us.
Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 222. Releasing July 19 in theatres, on demand and digital is Into the Ashes, a stirring revenge drama that delves into the insidious nature of violence and the choices we make when confronted by those with evil intent. Starring Luke Grimes, Frank Grillo and Robert Taylor, Into the Ashes is as thought-provoking and haunting a revenge thriller as they come, and I'm happy to say joining me on the podcast is the film's writer and director, Aaron Harvey. Aaron, I thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Into the Ashes, this is essentially a morality tale. It's also a very character-driven movie. I'm curious, when you first come up with the idea for the script and you put pen to paper, so to speak, is it the characters or the themes of the movie that resonate through you the most, or does one thing kind of funnel the other?
That's a good question. Actually, for the most part, when I start, and especially with this film, it starts with a place of theme, an idea of what I want to do. This movie, sprung from a lot of films that I really love that are very thematic sort of genre films, the sort of lonely man archetypal movies of the later 70s, Charlie Varrick, The Friends of Eddie Coyle, A Taxi Driver, A Rolling Thunder, films where, it's like simple stories and characters and plots for the most part, but they're saying something larger. The thematic implications tend to be more broad. And so with this movie, I wanted to sort of contribute to that vein of films, and I wanted to write a sort of thematic genre movie, and this movie about two men basically coming to terms with each other, rectifying their relationship over a mutual tragedy, and then sort of couching it in a revenge film, so to speak. But it definitely started with the themes first, and then the character second, and then the character in turn informs the story and kind of dictates what the story it needs to be to say the thing that the movie is trying to say. But it starts, at a place of theme and character, and they're kind of interwoven. But that's where this one began for sure.
The film begins with a really interesting opening monologue. It talks about the violence of the Old Testament, especially the story of Samson and how he slaughtered thousands with the jawbone of a donkey. To me, when I listen to that monologue, to me that kind of tells me that what you're saying in your part, and correct me if I'm right, is that violence is ancient and it's inherent within us. Is that what you're trying to get across with that monologue?
It is. I mean, that's part of it. There's two parts. Yes, that's definitely a big piece of why Frank lets us hear it at the beginning. And in turn, it bookends the same exact, with the continuation of the same exact monologue about Samson and like what would have happened, if they'd have let him go. So it's speaking to that exact nature of violence. But then second to that, it's also, in my mind for the story, it was this idea that, Frank as a character is such a black and white kind of definitive person who's sort of bound by this rule of law that he's subscribed to. And so when he's, it's very easy for him to sort of throw stones or make judgments when it's not personal. But once this tragedy that happens to him becomes a personal thing, and then in turn he sees how Luke's character sort of deals with it, and it basically will go to any length to rectify the situation. Frank has to deal with and understand it for himself because it's sort of his foundation is cracked a little bit, and so he doesn't know really how to necessarily process this because it's basically shaken his whole worldview. So the way that he in turn does it is he turns to Scripture because he's probably a guy that he was a church-going guy down, in the South there, and he probably, the irony about this is that he uses this sort of metaphysical story and book to kind of filter his literal, practical worldview through it, to gain a better understanding of the situation that he ends up finding himself in, and that he's had to sort of, bend his morals or be flexible on his morals, so to speak, considering the situation is now personal. And so he looks to that story, I think, to be almost like his excuse to maybe do what he does because he doesn't, know any other way to sort of understand it, I think. And that story, is a similar story in one respect, because it is a revenge tale, for the most part. And so for him, it was a measure of finding understanding through that story, and then using that as an interesting motif and kind of an irony, to sort of what happens to him, and having him, pontificate about it. I just thought it would be an interesting way to sort of have him share his feelings, so to speak. That makes sense.
It does, very much so. And another thing that I really got from your film was that it's the insidious nature of violence as well. You have the character of Nick, played by Luke Grimes. He tries to escape this life, but it follows him. It almost seems like violence is drawn to him, and the people around him kind of always get caught in the crossfire. Do you think that those who participate in violence can truly escape it, or is it something that's always going to be with them? Because with Nick's character, he wears scars. There's physical scars, there's psychological scars, and emotional scars. Mm-hmm. It's always with him. It can never really escape him. Do you think people can escape that life, that if they came from like a life of violence, if they participated in the violence?
In real life, I guess that's probably a more obtuse question. There's probably more shades of gray there. I think in terms of the film life and the way that these characters were, no, I don't think so. And I think that, for the most part, Sloane was almost like, Frank Grillo's character was almost supposed to sort of represent that. He was almost metaphysical. I didn't want to make him too big for what the movie was, but at the same time, we wanted him to sort of feel like this apparition that, it's like the conscious behind Nick, or it's like you said, his inability to escape his past or his violent past, and sort of the choices he's made all the way up to that point, in turn come back to haunt him. And so there's, if you wanted to get crazy metaphysical with it, it's a little bit of that, Sloane, is he even real? Is that character, does it just represent something? I mean, obviously it's a physical character. He is a person in the movie, and he does do what he does. But, I think that there was no way that Nick was ever really going to escape, what he did in his past. And, yeah, we sort of see the consequences of it, and we see the tragedy that befalls him because of the decisions he's made in his life. And so, it's somewhat of a morality tale, but also a very real, physical thing that happens to him. So, no, but I don't think so. I don't think he was ever going to get away.
No, and it does not. I want to talk about casting. Talk about the character of Luke, of Nick, played by Luke Grimes. I've seen him in a bunch of film stuff already. Haven't seen Yellowstone yet, but I've heard he's really good in that as well. But this, I think, is the best performance I've seen from him yet. How did you know that he was the right guy to play the role of Nick?
That's interesting. Number one, I agree with you. I think he did a great job in the film. Two, when we'd been putting together the list of actors that we were looking at for this movie, I tried to make my list realistic. I was like, okay, who are guys that we could kind of get to where I think we'd have an actual shot at doing the movie with? And his name always kind of floated on the top of my list because, ironically, I had actually seen him in Yellowstone in that first season. It was coming out around the same time as we were putting this together, and so I'd been fortunate to get a hold of it, and I'd watched it, and I thought, oh, this guy's great, and he has this kind of salt-of-the-earth thing going on, but he's known as, kind of this pretty boy from some of his other movies. And so, we sent it to his agent. He, in turn, gave it to Luke, and then Luke read it and really responded. And then when I got together with him in person for the first time and realized, he owns a 60-acre, piece of property in Ohio where he goes and hunts, and he's actually a really, salty guy. Like, he's just very grounded. We just hit it off immediately, and I was like, oh, he definitely is the essence of who this character is. And he was very excited about showing that as well, because this movie is more representative of who he actually is as a person, and I think in his real life than not. So it just worked serendipitously. It was really nice, that he did the movie with us, and I'm super excited with what he did.
Frank Grillo plays the part of the antagonist Sloane, and Frank Grillo is quickly becoming one of my favourite actors. It just seems everything I see him in is just solid on the ball, and this is no exception here. I noticed as well he's also an executive producer on this film, along with a collaborator of his, Joe Carnahan, are both in there. How did he come on board? Was it first in a production way, or was he cast first in a role and then that part came a little later?
No, he was definitely cast first in a role. Same thing. He was on a list I had of guys I really liked that I thought would be interesting for the part. And then same thing, very traditionally, his agent sent it to him. He loved it. We got together. He totally got on board really early on. And he definitely was a huge fan of the material and myself. And then over the course of discussions before we shot the movie, that's where he kind of got involved more in a producerial capacity to a degree. Him and Joe, they have a company together, War Party Films, and so we kind of brought them on early on after Frank was cast, to lend a hand if there was anything that they could do to sort of help the production. But no, it was for sure actor first. He just was very into the movie and what it was I wanted to do with the movie, and so he offered all of his support as much as he could beyond being just the actor. So that was great.
I read an interview that you did back when Catch 44 came out, and there was this really great quote in there where you said, in regards to making films, write what you want to see and direct what you want to see. This is your third feature film now. Does it get easier to reach that goal and do what you want to do and make the films that you want to make? Are you at that point now in your career that you think that you believe that you are doing that right now? You are making the films that you want to see on the screen?
That's two parts. One, it doesn't ever get easier. It's always a difficult, laborious thing. I mean, making a movie, especially trying to do independent films like this that are more unique, I should say, and less amenable to kind of what the system wants. That's always a difficult process, but you fight so hard for them because it is the movies you want to see and the movies you want to make. At least me personally, and so in terms of the actual ability to sort of keep the integrity of the film and make the movie honestly, make the film that I really do want to see. Yes, once we get to production, it's become easier because I've also kept the films in enough of budgetary check that I don't lose the reins too much in terms of the creative control of the film. And so, and if you've seen on the last two films, I've also produced them as well, primarily for that exact reason, which is, there's the only person that's going to protect the film really, truly is you and maybe the partners you work with who all have the same agenda. So it's gotten easier in that respect, and I'm happy with the last couple films creatively, because it's really the films that I set out to do, even within the limitations of the budget and time and everything else. So that's wonderful, and it's, very fulfilling for that to happen. But in terms of setting them up, I mean, small independent films like this it's always a difficult task. So you just got to really, love what you're doing and put the energy into the films you really want to make, which is why, these are such priority for me, because it's really, it starts with a place of, make the movie you want, make the movie you want to see, because if you do that and you do it honestly, people will respond. And I'm not, we're not trying to grab every low-hanging apple on the tree. We're trying to focus the film towards the people that are going to really appreciate the film, and make the best version of that movie that we can. So.
Final question, Aaron. Making the film is one thing, getting the film out there for the people to see is something completely different. I talk to a lot of indie filmmakers and I talk to them about new ways of distributing films these days and people to watch their films. You're moving into the ashes, as well as being in theaters. It will be on digital or will be on demand. You are inspired by filmmakers such as Friedkin and other filmmakers from the 70s and 80s, and most of their stuff were made for the big screen. They didn't have that small screen option before. As a filmmaker in this day and age, having that option to release your films on all different types of platforms for people to see anywhere, is for you, does that bring about exciting possibilities for yourself and other filmmakers as well, that they can put their films out there, people can see it whenever they can? And do you like the idea of people watching your film on big screens, small screens, and every type of screen in between?
I mean, two parts. Yeah, it's exciting that, more people can get their stuff out there. I love that. I mean, open the floodgates if you can, let people have access and have that release, because it's helped me, and then, it's helped friends of mine that have done film. So yeah, I love that idea. But, then on the flip side of that coin, I'm definitely more of a Luddite in terms of, I love cinema. I want films to be seen on a big screen. Of course, you want film in the theater. That's always the goal, is to have people come and enjoy it where, it needs to be enjoyed, which is on the big screen. So, beggars can't be choosers per se. So I'm happy with the way that it works out. I'm glad that it is on, in theaters. But, on a broad overall sense, I'm just happy people can watch the film anywhere. So, if you have to watch it on your phone because that's all you can do, great. But, preferentially, yeah, would it be on 3,000 screens? For sure. But the business has changed and the whole model has shifted, and it's a little bit of, adapt or die. So I guess you gotta take what you can get and push for everything you want and see where it lands. And I'm very happy that it's in theaters so people can see it on the big screen. But definitely watch it wherever you can get your hands on it. Whatever works.
And I agree with that 100%. So everyone out there listening, July 19 in theaters, on demand, and digital, Into the Ashes. I really enjoyed your film, Aaron. It really made me think a lot afterwards, and I really appreciate watching genre films that do this. And congratulations to you on the film, and hopefully I could see more of your films in the future because I like all of your work so far.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it, and I hope so. I hope to keep making them. So we'll talk about the next one.
Excellent. Until there, take care, Aaron. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You as well. Take care.